Where I live now, there's a paper company that it's still in business. It's Strathmore Paper. If you ever heard of them, they do a great quality Strathmore Grandee, which when I was working in New York was a highly sought after business card stock.
Okay.
And back when they were running a large factory there, they had one of those, like, you know, amazing American production factories that you see now in, like, China, where, you know, a company would grow up and a village would start to form around it. They'd have, you know, worker housing and stuff like that. So it was a rather large company, and they would dump effluents into the rivers because, you know, there wasn't any, you know, stricture upon what they did, and, you know, they had a lot of clout because they were supporting a town.
Sure.
Yeah. So the river would turn colors. You know, it would be maybe blue today, maybe bright yellow and stuff like that. So people of my generation, our generation, you know, give or take a 10-year in either direction from me, say I'm 40, so from 30s to 50s, they're growing up with manic depression. And there's a tremendous amount of male manic depression in my town. And, you know, so one wonders where that would come from. And, you know, personally, I think it's environmental.
I agree. I think that one of the things that we didn't mention right away is in the beginning of this segment is that this is about sickness, because the poisoning is exactly it. The sickness, the rise in all of these things, like you just said, manic depression in an isolated area due to chemicals.
Right. Right. And the interesting thing, which goes, you know, to the medical aspect of it, is, again, in my opinion, most pharmaceutical companies will treat you but never cure you.
Of course, they can't cure you. If they cure you, they lose their customer. You know, so there's obviously a clear connection with big pharma and the foods too. I mean, the whole thing is, you know, you can't have wholesome foods to eat. You know, you can't. You have to have all these poisonous things put into your food. You know, put aspartame in everything, which is cancer causing. It's proven. You know, it's in cough medicine, your children's cough medicine. Go throw it away. This is crazy. I mean,
right. Yeah,
exactly. We're being poisoned.
Yeah.
You know. Going back to this whole idea is, like, again, I have some information, some documentation here about multiple sclerosis, which is very interesting. There has been an increase of over 50% in cases of multiple sclerosis in the last 15 years. It shows that 1 in 1,000 Americans have multiple sclerosis. That means about 300,000 people or more. And when this study was done, actually in 2007, it's actually increased since then. So you're probably closer to 1 in 900 or so Americans are getting this, and it's increasing in its virulence. It's going ahead, and the same thing also has to do with autism. Since we're talking about autism and chemicals and poisoning America, our soldiers are being poisoned. The rate of the military autism in the children after Gulf War, the veterans that came home after the first Gulf War in 1991, raised families, their children, they have a 3 times the national average, which is, as of last year's estimate, 5.5 out of every 1,000 children have autism.
That's a lot.
Nearly, you know, that's just last year's estimate. But now smaller studies have ranged from 1 out of every 10,000 to nearly 1 in 100. It depends on the community.
Yeah.
Which is, again, an environmental...
Insanity. Yeah.
It is insanity.
Yeah.
It is insanity. And this is something we have to be raising awareness about. Multiple sclerosis, the same thing. I have the charts that you're seeing now as we speak. These are all the autism rates. As you can see that there's a spike. It looks like the stock market should look, ladies and gentlemen.
On the rise.
On the rise,
yeah.
Exactly. And the same thing with the multiple sclerosis. Now, DU, which is what the Gulf War veterans were exposed to, has also had an increased rise in genital cancer for both men and women who have had to be subjected to sitting on these shells, which have enriched uranium, depleted uranium. Well, what about the bats and the bees? And the trees that are dying?
Right, but going back for sexual reproduction in organisms, and I think that was one of the major problems with amphibians, with the amphibian species. Frogs are disappearing. There's a big cry of frogs and newts, any kind of amphibian, and they're saying that there's a stunt in the growth of the male reproductive system due to environmental factors, and that's why we're losing, you know, swaths of population of those. And those are very critical because being an amphibian itself, you know, your body is relegated directly by your environment. Like, they don't have a lot of control over their heat, and you know, they're practically moist, and
Yes.
it's an incredible, you know, they really subsist on where they exist. You know, so like in the forest, in the rivers, and you know, and all of these systems are so interlocked that you can't avoid being affected by something that happens across the globe. So if something is going on in China and mercury is being released there, and you know, you can sit here in America or Canada on the other hemisphere and say, well, you know, that's their problem. It's not their
true.
problem.
It goes in the atmosphere, into the
Right.
air, and we're breathing it. But
Yeah.
what about the chemtrails? I mean, the whole
Yeah.
thing is a big, you know, they're spraying these chemicals. They're finding, here's an interesting connection. They're finding aluminum and barium in water. And interestingly enough, this disaster which took place in Hungary, the toxic red sludge that hits the Danube River, firefighters clean a yard flooded by toxic mud in Diefkors, Hungary on Wednesday. All fish have already died in the Markel River. At least 4 people have been killed and hundreds hospitalized with burns from the corrosive substance.
But according to the European Union, this is not a hazardous
No,
material.
it's not a hazardous. It's not hurting you. See, this is all the funny thing. The European Union, the New World Order, the globalist agenda. They create the problem and then they offer the solution. Like, destroy the ecology, do all these terrible things, get all these people sick, and say, oh, it's all the and then let's tax business with a carbon tax to fix this. Same thing with our economy, with the Federal Reserve, the whole nonsense. You know, they create the problem and then they offer the solution. This is something more Americans are waking up to every day, and I hope that you are too. But getting back to the subject matter, so yes, there's this thing, and then there's BP. I have documentation of what's in this stuff, something called Corexit 9527 and Corexit 9500.
Sounds wholesome.
It does sound wholesome, yeah. Here's really chemically what it is. It's propanidol, ethanol, all sorts of really nasty.
I think those are all petroleum derivatives.
They're all petroleum derivatives, that is correct. And the environmental damages, as I was saying, with the invasions of Iraq, the population have suffered a great amount of damage due to the intense wars there since 1980. And again, there's a rise in these cancers. Air pollution is a thermal pollution. This is all from the wars, and they're saying it's global warming. It's
Right. Well, incredibly enough, it seems like, you know, petroleum is such a scarce commodity apparently that we can practically make everything out of it.
Yeah,
that's surrounding us. It's so scarce.
Wait,
that
that's right. You make everything.
throwaway things, like, you know, like knobs are being made out of it, and we still have Formula One racing. So it's so, you know, scarce that we have to spend so much and tax so much and be accounted to pay for this hard to find commodity that's getting harder to find, that we can make, you know, shoelace things out of it and little funny twirly things that you can play with. But it's very scarce.
It's unbelievable. And then again, look, radiological pollution associated with the Iraq War from 1991. Uranium weapons, depleted uranium weapons used by the United States and allies in Gulf War I. Contamination caused an increase in cancer and incident rates of congenital malformations to 6 times more than the prior war in southern Iraq, where more than 320 tons of DU emissions had been fired. So they're increasing it. In this case, they're saying nothing's wrong. Don't worry about it. That's what the same thing with Hungary. The same thing with BP. Don't worry about it. When the government says not to worry, ladies and gentlemen, when they say it's safe, believe me, it's not. It's exactly the opposite. Everything these people say, they do exactly the opposite. Just look at our president. Okay? Everything that he said he would do, he went back on. And I voted for this man. And I followed through, and I thought that he would step up to the plate and not be just another New World Order, you know, Bilderberg CFR puppet. But that's all he is.
Well, we don't have a POTUS, we have a TOTUS, the teleprompter of the United States.
The teleprompter of the United States, a good lawyer, a slick willy lawyer, just like Clinton. Yeah, same thing. And I voted for Clinton too. I was deceived. I have just recently awoken.
Democracy under the influence.
Democracy under the influence. That's what we should call it.
Yeah, it is DUI. It's a country gone drunk.
Yeah,
with power.
Drunk with power. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
You know, when you think about it,
we should DUI.
We should charge the government with DUI. Drunk. Yeah.
Democracy under the influence. Power mongers.
It's just outrageous. So we've covered the multiple sclerosis. We've covered the BP. Depleted uranium. Project SHAD. Are you familiar with this at all?
No.
If you don't believe that the government would do things like this, you got to understand, I say the government, I got to quantify it. There is an elite group of people that are running the show through the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group. They call the shots. Their agenda is moving towards a world government, a new world order. Project SHAD is basically was part of a larger effort by the Department of Defense, which began in 1962 during Kennedy's administration, and is largely believed that Kennedy nor the subsequent presidents knew of Project 112. Okay? Now, what this is it was an exposure of uninformed and unwilling humans during the testing of test substances, particularly the exposure to the United States military personnel. Now, this isn't anything new. Project SHAD has been revealed. Of course, this doesn't make the mainstream news. This has been known for a long, long time, for years, but nobody talks about it. So if you've got a government that's going to do tests on people, we know about the CIA mind test. I spoke about that in the last episode that we had, the last forum, and it's the same thing here. An official statement on Project SHAD's purpose was, quote, to identify U.S. warships' vulnerabilities to attacks with biological or chemical warfare agents. 1962. Wow. What happened to the Gulf War syndrome here? What about all of these illnesses? The rise in all of these diseases? What's the best controlled population? The military. Everybody that has served in the military knows that they get knocked up with shots. These days they just put these two big shots on one arm and each arm, and boom, and you're getting like 12 shots at once, and people get sick from it. People die from it.
They sign off unwillingly,
they
too,
sign
when they
off
enter into service.
That's correct.
Yeah.
It's servitude is exactly what it is.
Yeah, and they offer them promotion based on that.
The horrific thing is these are patriotic Americans that think and believe that they're doing the right thing for their country, not realizing that they're serving the globalists' nefarious intentions. Make war, speak peace.